now we just welcome our third speaker, Professor He Xin. He Xin is a professor at Hong Kong U Law Faculty, and he's pioneering in studying China's legal system from a socio-legal perspective. So he just newly published a book named Divorce in China, Institutional Constraints and Gendered Outcomes. So today he will also we'll talk about the findings and analysis of this new book and his research on how the institutions failed to protect women's rights in divorce litigation in China. So Professor He Xin, hello. Can you share screen?
All right. Thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate this opportunity. I attended some activities of the event that have been organized before, and I would say I'm very impressed. Right? So it's a great effort for you to do this. I think it just need to make more effort to have more impact to Chinese society. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about the domestic violence and in the divorce litigation. Right. So the last time I attended your event, basically there are many different aspects to look at the issues of domestic violence. This time I simply try to get into the court and to provide a perspective from the Chinese court and see how the judges make the decisions, how they view the events, the difficulties, and then how to illustrate what factors are affecting their decisions and what the impact on the domestic violence victims. So as you all know that I have just this book published. So the only thing I want to mention here is that there's a discount code out here. So if you really want to buy the book, you can just get 30% by quoting the number here. All right. So then what's the situation of divorce in China in the first place? Right. So you will see. Nowadays, actually, divorce in China increased dramatically. Right? So some statistics will say that 40% of marriage actually end up in divorce, and then that will be even higher in big cities such as Beijing and Shanghai. Right? So as you can imagine, a lot of divorce litigations as well. Right? So that hit basically 1.5 million. My number is not the most updated, but it's more or less. Right? So it's very high. And then 70% of the plaintiffs are female. Right? So of course there are a lot of reasons for divorce. Right? So the domestic violence is often listed as the second reason for filing a divorce. Right? So the first, of course, is the incompatibility of personality. That's very general. Right? So, but it's the second major reason for divorce litigation is the domestic violence, which is the focus of my talk. Then the book and my research is basically from interviews and quantitative data, right? So from the two courts in different parts of China, one is for Shanxi province, the other is our neighboring Guangdong province. I attended a lot of the divorce litigation hearings. I think I attended about 100 and over the 10 years. I also talk to the judges, sometimes the lawyers and the litigants as well. Right? So there are many stories has been analyzed in the book. Right? So but I won't be able to touch many of them. I may give one or two. But basically, the data I relied on for my research is quantitative. It's not just it's more qualitative, not quantitative. All right, so let me just introduce a little bit about the divorce law, the criterion for divorce, right? So once we have a petition, then what's the standard for granting divorce or not? That's perhaps is well known, right? So it's usually called a breakdown of the mutual affection, right? So in Chinese, that would be 情感是否确已破裂, right? So whether there is a breakdown of the mutual affection. This, I have to confess, this is maybe the most confusing legal principle I have ever learned, right? So of course, the law has specified some criteria, such as whether there is domestic violence, for example, whether there is a separation for 2 years, right? So but what I can tell you is that all those seemingly clear standards may not be relevant in the decision-making process, right? So what I found after 20 or 30 years after law schools is a totally different approach to the issue of divorce. So what I find actually is very striking. Basically, we don't need to look at those details of the marriage and whether there's evidence for this thing and that. We only need to look at certain procedure issues, right? So the first one is this the first petition for divorce, or the petition has been filed before? This is the second or third times. If it is the first timer, basically the chance being rejected is very high, right? So the most first time the petition for divorce was rejected, and then the court will grant divorce for the second petition or even later, right? So, but basically, if the divorce may impose some threat for social stability, then there's a good chance that those petitions will never be granted, but it's very rare, right? So but it takes a lot of time and a lot of petitions. There are instances that divorce have been filed 6 and 7 times, even 10 times, and then basically people will just give up, and then some disaster happened afterwards. The second procedure issue I would look at is basically whether the court is taking a simplified procedure or a regular procedure to handle the petition. It seems to be quite striking because the procedure cannot really determine the decision. But the point is that if the court has already decided to use a simplified procedure, that means basically it's only by one judge. Right? So if it's regular procedure, there will be a panel of 3 people, right? So it will be the judge or assessors. So if it is adopted by simplified procedure, then the chance of not getting a divorce is very, very high, right? So if it's eventually handled by a regular procedure, then the chance of being granted a divorce becomes much higher. So putting these 2 procedure items together and considerations together, basically you can estimate, like 80 or even 90% of the outcome of those divorce petitions. I'm going to elaborate these points a little bit later. So the third point is basically if there's a highly contested divorce, and then there's main threat more immediate and realistic to social stability, they're threatening suicide or this kind of thing, then there will be no divorce, as I just already mentioned, or delayed divorce, right? So the reason behind those routinized pattern is basically out of the concern of the judges, because the judges have their own things to think about in addition to the law, right? The first one is what I call caseload concern. As I said, there's a very high number of cases in the Chinese court. The Chinese judge must handle the cases efficiently, right? So if they decide no divorce, then the case is closed, right? So they don't have to do anything, right? So no petition of property, no argument and concerns for anything about the child custody and division of property and these kind of difficult issues, right? So no divorce for first timer basically is the best solution for them, right? So and then if you, I mean the litigants are unhappy about the outcome, they still can come back and apply for the petition 6 months again, right? So that they still have hope. So you won't have any serious consequences. They just need a little bit more time. Their petition just simply be delayed, right? And then another concern is stability concern, right? So the judge must make sure that once they hand out the decision, there's no appeal, no petition, nobody commits suicide, or nobody get killed. No fire is set, right? So no other type of malicious instance that caught attention of the higher authority, right? So that's a serious concern. So that's why if somebody actually can impose a realistic threat to social stability, they are not going to grant divorce, right? So that's the two concerns combined. You could see explain perfectly why the judges adopt the routinized approach, right? So that is no divorce for first timer, and then basically they are divorce for later applicants, right? So then what's the implication for domestic violence and for women in this process, right? So the point is that once they're taking this routinized approach, basically the forces of inequality in other aspects, such as the social, economic, cultural, and political bias, can easily get into their decisions, right? So I can give you some of those examples, and then you'll see what had happened in the area of domestic violence. That's the focus of today's talk, right? So, as I said, domestic violence is a statutory requirement, a threshold for divorce, right? So once domestic violence is established, the judge shall grant a divorce, right? So because that's a serious issue, of course, and you all understand that. But because of the concerns of the judges about social stability and caseload and efficiency, right? So many cases when they are fired, they are pressured to withdraw. Because the judge will just simply say that, oh, I understand there is a domestic violence, but there are also economic reasons that you have to keep in mind, right? Can you really handle raising, say, your two children with your own job, right? So without support of your husband, right? So there are some cases like that. Like 1 or 2 sentences of the judges who basically pressure the women to withdraw their divorce petition. And then in cases settled, right? So we all know that mediation is a main approach to handle divorce cases in China, right? So and many actually indeed settled, and basically both parties agreed to divorce or reconcile. But in either way, domestic violence, the issue of domestic violence is basically erased, is disappeared, vanished in this process, right? So the point is quite straightforward, right? So the domestic violence issue usually is very contested, very hotly debated when women claim that they are victims of the domestic violence. The men often denied, right? So they will not say that they actually beat you, right? So they often said, I didn't beat her. We are fighting against each other, right? So 我没有打她 right? So 我们只是对打 we are fighting against each other, right? So they don't admit they commit domestic violence. But in cases that even if the domestic violence has been established by the evidence, once it's get into the mediation process, that issue is basically forgotten. Right? So because the judge, in order to reach a settlement outcome, will never raise the issue of domestic violence again. If that issue is raised, and then the man will be very resistant. Right? So they will say, I didn't do that. I didn't do anything. Right? So I still want a fair share of the property or child custody. Right? So that's why the issue of domestic violence is often erased once the case is settled. And then how about if the case is adjudicated instead of mediated? Then you will see a lot of literature indeed shows that domestic violence really recognized and barely compensated in those decisions, right? So the burden of proof seems to be extremely high, right? So the evidence required seems to be very high. And then the judge just steadfastly refused to accept the evidence provided by the victim. And according to one quantitative research by Ethan Mickelson, he found, based on thousands of the court decisions, he found that if one make a claim on domestic violence in their petition, that will only decrease the chance of getting divorce. That's extremely striking, even though we know that domestic violence is a legal requirement for granting divorce, right? So the point is that if you raise that point, it will not help you to get divorce. It will decrease your chance of getting a divorce. The reason is very simple. It goes back to the stability concern I just mentioned, right? So the judge confessed, many cases, many scenarios, that for the men who beat their wives so inhumanly, those people are hard to deal with, right? So those people are troublemaker, and you don't know what they're going to do to their wife, to their families, even to the judges. So we better be careful. Just follow his will, right? So that's why, if one actually raised the issue of domestic violence, the chance of getting divorce actually is lower, right? So it's very sad finding, but it can only be understood in the concern of the social stability and the judge's concerns instead of the law, right? So there's another study by Professor Chen and her associate. So what she found actually is from Chongqing court, right? So out of 458 litigants, so only 3 eventually got compensation due to domestic violence, right? So this is a small scale quantitative research based on all the divorce cases they can find on Chongqing district court. So, and then you can also see the protective orders underutilized in this process, and previously Hao Yang just mentioned these, right? So my number is not that updated because the research has been completed quite a while ago. So what I found actually, in, say for example, in 2018, the court across the country only issued 2,000 protective orders, right? So but China has more than 3,000 courts, right? So on average, one court didn't even issue 1 protective orders for the whole year, right? So the divorce cases they handled every year reached 1.5 million, right? So and then at least 10 or 20% of those petitions have the issues of domestic violence, right? So you could see the number is very, very low, right? So I also agree with Hao Yang that actually, if the court actually issue the protective orders, it could be quite effective. But the point is that the court refused to issue that for other reasons, right? There are many, of course. But one is that the court seems to be reluctant to do this because it doesn't increase their performance. It is only increase more job, create more job for the judge. Right? So they would rather not do it. Right? So they will just say, hey, you are actually getting a divorce. Why do you still need a protective order? Right? So then if you do need that, you have to provide very different kind of evidence. Right? So because the session, today's topic is violence, right? So I just talk a little bit about sexual violence that I happened to find in my research. Right? So the one is marital rape, and China's law does not really recognize that. So basically, it's not be an issue, right? So, but there are the domestic rape, right? So the rape actually committed not bad at husband, right, by other family members. I happened to encounter one very dramatic case that the wife claimed that her father-in-law has attempted to rape her twice. Right. So, and then that's the real reason that she wanted to be divorced. But it seems that father-in-law was a very powerful and strong real person in the family. Right. So nobody can try to tell and choose to any relatives. Right. So the wife was very courageous to tell the judge because she feels so unfair in the property division, right? So but the judge doesn't really do much. She just used this as a bargaining chip to force the man's family to make some concessions on property division, right? So that indeed the police station is just a neighbor of the court. One call from the judge would just get a man arrested, but she didn't do anything. She just want to, as I said, should handle the case effectively and safely. Right? So as long as the case is closed, that's it. Right? So that's the goal of the judge. They don't want to actually step into this area of the sexual harm. Right? So that there are also other type of sexual harm. It's not really rape, but different kind of things, right? So, but it's also make the life of the wife very difficult. And then, but again, the judge will not want to do much, right? So just try to convince the ladies that, okay, this may be some cultural bias out there, but maybe some political concerns, because then we can't really grant a divorce to you because the other party has more important concerns. And then if it is divorced, there might be some unexpected malicious incidents, right? So those are also happened because of we can say this is cultural bias, right? So it's just only one aspect of the inequalities that has actually get into the court decision, right? So then, if we understand some aspect of this approach, then basically you can see the existing explanation for the disadvantaged position of women in the court are inadequate. Right? Some argue this law is not good enough. So actually, Chinese divorce law is quite good compared to other jurisdictions. Has been developed, progressed quickly and fast, right? So the other people say, hey, it's man and wife, and basically has a huge economic disparity, right? So then what can you do, right? So if you decide, okay, so the child custody shall belong to those who can take the best interest of children, and it's the man in the best position, right? So then that has been reflected in the court decision. That's true, but again, that's not enough. And cultural bias I just mentioned, right? So the point I argued, my own argument is very straightforward. What I'm saying is that the judges of their concern indeed thought the law's implementation, as I showed in the issue of domestic violence. The law is very clear, right? Domestic violence is a factor that the court shall consider, and actually they shall grant divorce if there is domestic violence, but they didn't, right? So they also allowed penetration of other type of bias in the item of, say, in the sexual violence, right? So they basically say that culturally that's like for a long time, right? So it seems that women have to suffer this kind of thing, right? So according to Li Ke, another sociologist's research, even the judges, equal the lawyers, I call the judges concern, right? So if there is marital rape, the lawyer would just say to their client, what he did was lawful, right? So because the Chinese law doesn't actually, actually criminalized marital rape, right? So the judge basically allowed those other type of social and economic bias to get into their decisions because they're concerned of social stability, of efficiency, right? So that's really the difficult part to have a equal footing for both genders in the divorce litigation. So eventually we had a gendered outcome, right? So the outcome is not simply are not equal based on the two genders, actually based on who you are, right? So what your gender is, right? So I argue there's an institutional failure to protect women's rights in divorce litigation, right? So it's very difficult to get rid of this problem. We can change the law, but we also need, more importantly, to change the incentives for the judges when they're making their decisions. We can lower, say, the burden of proof for domestic violence, right? So you don't have to prove that much. The causal link, the type of evidence, this kind of thing, right? So that's one thing. Another thing, more important thing, is that how to change the incentive mechanism for the judges when they're making their decisions. Right? So I think I'm going to stop here. Thank you again.
Thank you, Professor He, for your presentation and all of our guest speakers. So as time is really limited, because according to the settings of the NGO CSW website, this Zoom meeting will automatically close after 10 minutes at 11:10. So we already have some questions here. I think maybe they can respond to some of it and about the situation in China and Hong Kong respectively. And then we can go to Jacey, can briefly talk about the situation in Hong Kong, responding to these questions.
Okay, so I think two questions that are related to me. First of all, is about the intersectionality. Yes, of course, intersectionality is always the mindset that we have when we do advocacy. And as for, if you're looking back at the example that I showcased, which is the image-based sexual violence, we noticed that the victim survivors are all very young, who are aged between 20 to 24. So it's very influential in our strategy because of this, we approach a lot of youngsters groups. So in selecting the kinds of NGOs that we work with, we usually connect with those who serve youngsters. And secondly, about sexual orientation, even though that our organization is serving women, but we notice that for the digital sexual violence, it's very common among men, especially gay men, because they have the habit of using dating apps to meet friends and to know sex partners, or to have sex chats, so on and so forth. So we notice that among gay men, digital sexual violence or image-based sexual violence is very serious, as a matter of fact. And therefore, we also work with gay men groups. And at the same time, when we explore the surface surrounding image-based sexual violence, we are not limited to women. We're open to all genders. so as to welcome that no matter you are homosexual or heterosexual, no matter you are male, females, transgender, or intersex people, they are all welcome. So this is, I hope I've answered your question about the intersectionality. Another one is about the domestic violence law in Hong Kong. I think the law in Hong Kong is not about prevention, but it's more the law that tackle when the domestic violence happens, which is to a bit like mainland China, to grant to empower the courts to grant the injunction orders to the victims of domestic violence. And that law in Hong Kong is called the Domestic Violence Ordinance 2009, if you're interested to look it up. So it was actually a civil law that came into effect in 1986. So I think it's quite ahead of mainland China. And then there was a very big amendments that took place in 2009. The major amendments was before that, in 1986, the law only confined to the married couple, and they are heterosexual married couple. But then in 2008, sorry, did I say 2009? The amendment was taking place in 2008. That they broadened to any relationship, any cohabitation relationship. So between two persons, whether of the same sex or the opposite sex. So it means that if you are a heterosexual couple, even if you're not married, but you live together and you are in an intimate relationship, you're protected under this domestic violence ordinance. So, and as I said, the ordinance is an ordinance that provides the district court in Hong Kong to grant the injunction order that prevent the abusers from harassing or intimidating or doing abusive acts towards the victim.
Okay, thank you, Jacey. And I think there are also two questions for Professor He. One is that is there any way to train judges? And also the other one is that how often do women who file for divorce continues to file again or even repeatedly after divorce is denied?
Thank you. I'll answer the first question. The second question first. I don't have the numbers. I think there must be some numbers somewhere. I think Ethan Mackelson may have those numbers from his sample. But my impression is simply that the percentage shall be very high. The reason is simply that the first denial doesn't really solve the problem in the marriage and a divorce. Right? So if you are having this whatever the causes for divorce, then actually one denial doesn't get rid of the cause for filing divorce. Right? So whether it's domestic violence or incompatibility of personality, this kind of thing, right? So they and then eventually the litigants also know that the chance of getting divorce first time is very low. The lawyers, of course, know that too, right? So some lawyers basically say bluntly to their clients, so is this your first application? If it is, then you don't really need me because you are not going to get divorced anyway. So only at the second petition I can help. Right? So everybody understand this is just routine based approach. This is just a routine you have to go through, right? So the 6 months, basically the first petition, right? So again, the chance, I would say this is very high. And then one of the outcomes is that those who are the victims of domestic violence actually suffered in this process, in this delay, because the justice delayed is injustice, right? So, and then even the men are emboldened by the court's petition. See, you want to divorce me, and then you see that the court actually is on my side, right? So they refuse your petition. So they even get beaten even harder. So in this process, right?
On April the 7th, we'll have a very specific online lecture of Professor He to introduce about his new book. So I think it's about the time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jacey, Professor He, to join our event today. And also thank you for all the audience. Also, I have a little bit of advertisement on this. If you want to contact us, because we are a project affiliated to Hong Kong U, so you can contact us by on our website and all through emails. We are organized this kind of like online webinars and lectures or workshops on equality rights, including like gender-based violence and discrimination in China in the future. So you can follow us on also on Facebook and this website. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have a nice day.